especially I think over the last year, my poetry has been very much with the intention of radicalizing people. So I'd love more people to listen to my poetry and become a bit more radicalized about life.
Nice. I'm going to take that out of context completely and use it as a clip. But
yeah, just that.
Yeah. I'd love my poetry to radicalise people. No content on not saying which way I want them to be radicalised, just that I want them
Arab guests wants to radicalise people.
Hello and welcome to the Prose podcast. I will still not do an intro because that's like effort, and I do a lot of effort, but not that kind of effort. But what I do put effort in is getting guests. That's a thing, sure, whatever. I have a wonderful guest with me today. I have Celine with me today.
Hey.
Hello, Celine. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I am not too bad. To date this podcast. This is the day after my birthday, and I am feeling it today.
Yeah.
There is a reason why it's definitely water in this cup, because my God, that was a night. But yes, the way I like to start these podcasts is going into like how we first met, which frankly is an easy one here. So Can you describe how we first met?
So actually, I don't know if you remember this, but the first time we ever actually spoke was an event before we first met, which was...
feels like I need more explanation.
It was still Spit Nights. Spit Nights is like a poetry night that we do. It was Spit Nights, and it was my first ever spoken word in years, maybe at least a year since I'd gone to a poetry event, and I saw that my poem was on their poetry wall, and I think, I don't know, you were stressed sorting out cameras and lighting, and I saw it on the wall and I went, oh my God, that's my poem, and you went, okay. And you walked away from me.
Good. That sounds very tiring.
Yeah, so that was technically the first time we met, but then the first time we properly had a conversation was the Spit Nights event after that.
Which was the slam, it would have been.
It was the one after the slam. One after the slam,
yeah. Yes, because I saw you at the slam and you would have killed it at the slam, etc.
Thank you very much.
And then we properly talked after because you had a 5-10 minute set or whatever.
Yes.
One after.
That was when we properly met, yeah.
Yes, cool. There we go. That's the story I had. Like, the more I do this podcast, the more I realise I have very bad first meetings with people.
Do you know what? It's fine. It's fine. I don't believe in first impressions. I believe in second impressions, so it's fine.
I mean, even my second impression with some people is not good either, but we're getting...
It's fine. It's fine, you know?
Yes. But we're going to be talking about you and other things today, and we're going to do words. I can do words. To do that, we're going to be starting with my section I like to call Timelines. People who don't know, you are a very big book person and writer in all kinds of fields of writing, etc. So for you, as for your past, how did you get into writing? I'm assuming it's something like always been writing, etc.
Not to be the most cliche person in the world, but it is a case of I have always been doing it. So I didn't grow up in this country. So I started really reading and writing in Liberia. I grew up in Liberia in West Africa. And reading, I was gaslit into by my mother, which was fantastic on her part, but it was essentially, I hated reading when I was around 6 years old, and my mum would gaslight me by every time I do something well, or I would pass a test, or I'd do well in school, my mum would be like, oh my God, congrats Celine, tonight we can read together. And I think, why are you punishing me for doing well? Until eventually she really committed to the act, and I started being like, I've done a good job, can I read tonight? And then once I started getting into reading was when I started getting into writing, and I always started with poetry, strangely enough, because then I had such a long period in my life where the only thing I wrote was prose, but one of the very first things I ever wrote was a short story, and then immediately after that was a poem. So I've been writing essentially since I was 8 years old, maybe.
Nice. And like, with obviously starting to write more, etc. Like, when did it get into from writing it to sharing it, etc.?
Oh, a long time. A very, very long time. I think I would show few people my poems that I knew personally, you know, people I was really, really, really close to, but sharing it publicly, I think the first time I ever publicly shared a poem, besides submitting to competitions and stuff, but publicly to people to perceive me willingly, was during lockdown, when I would just post some of my poetry on my stories. And the first time I ever actually performed at a spoken word night was after I'd had my heart broken, and I had no option but to just go and be angry and upset on stage somewhere. And that was in, I think, October of 2020. 2. So that was my first time ever actually getting on stage and performing my stuff.
Nice. And like, obviously, like talking about spoken word there, like when you started writing poetry, like before that, like how aware were you of spoken word as a thing? Or was that like a thing that you kind of eventually grew to know?
It was, yeah, so I was aware of it. It wasn't a thing I ever really explored for a while. I was, you know, we all went through that phase where we were really obsessed with button poetry. It was button poetry that I was really obsessed with. But at the time, you know, the person I was, I guess, I wasn't as, I don't want to say advanced, because you can be an advanced poet and not be a spoken word poet, but I wasn't as confident in my voice as a poet as I am now. And so a lot of my poetry was sort of, I call it loose inspiration, but sometimes just trying to be other poets and trying to be the people. You know, I studied English at university, so when I would write poetry or read poetry, I would always be trying to emulate what I was studying and what I was reading. And it wasn't until lockdown, I think, again, when I really started exploring spoken word as a mode for my poetry, and that's when I really found my voice. I think I don't really do non-spoken poems anymore as much.
Nice. And like being a little bit naive on this whole topic here, but like for you, obviously not growing up in London, etc., not growing up in England, were you writing stuff in English all the time, or did you like eventually move to writing in English?
I always wrote in English because, so I learned English very young. I learned English at maybe aged 4 because the school I was at was a British system first, and then I went to an Arabic school. So I learned English very, very young. And my mum was dead set on making sure I was strong at speaking English, because I think she always knew that we would move to an English-speaking country, or at the very least I would go to university at an English-speaking country. So my mum was very dead set in making sure I had strong English. So yeah, it's always been writing in English. I've tried to write in Arabic. It's just, I'm not as talented as Arab poets. I just must say I don't know their grammar like they do.
No, that's fair. And I think like that's always the thing of like, I've been fortunate enough to like perform to different kinds of audiences, including some international audiences. And there's always a part of me that wants to like try and translate my poems, but that is a whole job in of itself, translating stuff. It's not just like a word for word, one for one thing. It's like,
and the rhythm is so different. The syllables are different in every language. The rhymes are different in every language. It's just, the
references, the turns of phrase, etc., the stuff like that, it's idioms and all that kind of stuff is so language specific. It's like, no, I can't just do it as a one-for-one thing.
Exactly. Like I can, you know, it makes perfect sense for me to say, you know, I swallowed my words in English, but in Arabic, if I say balat kalimati, like it means physically actually swallowing my word. It doesn't have the same translation when it comes out.
No, yeah. That's always a weird one. But like moving from your past into your present now, like obviously as well with you, we know that whilst TikTok has its hit and misses of it all, you're definitely a prominent part of BookTok, etc.
Yes,
you started doing also the YouTube essays on the book stuff as well. So with your present, with you obviously still exploring poetry, but also writing books, etc. Where is your present now? What are you doing at the moment?
So at the moment, I'm trying very hard to get published. I've just finished writing my first young adult high fantasy novel. So again, back to the prose. That was where I dedicated so much of my writing and my time. I'm in the process of trying to reach out to agents and trying to get my book published and committed and signed. So that's it. I'm using BookTok is great. It's a great platform for me. Terrifying when I thought the book ban was coming, because a great percentage of my audience is American. But I've been sharing about that book, about my poetry on BookTok, so I'm hoping I'll be able to utilize this platform to promote this book. People seem to be excited about it, but it's great. It's a great space for me to just get up and go on my rants and my tangents about books, about poetry, about video essays, about things that just piss me off within the literary world.
This is why I have a podcast and I can do it on this.
I just bought a microphone. I just bought a wireless microphone and I clipped it to all the holders and I just put a foam thing on top of it. And I filmed a video essay yesterday and I sat there with the microphone and I was like, oh, this feels powerful. I understand podcasts now. I feel unstoppable. But yeah, that's what the social media platforms have been for me, essentially, just like a literary space.
Nice. And like, obviously with prose and poetry and all this being obviously very different, but obviously still writing itself. How is it for you, especially in the present, switching between the two and juggling both?
Do you know, it's actually a lot harder than someone would think, because when I'm in my prose brain, absolutely nothing in the world could get a poem out of me. And when I'm in my poetry brain, there's no way I'm going to work on my book. It's like there is a part in my book where a poem was required, and I couldn't for the life of me. And it was just it was a haiku. It wasn't even you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I couldn't for the life of me get it out of me. And for a great example is I've got this performance coming up, the spoken word performance, and I wanted to write a poem for that, but I was in the process of editing this book. I was in the process of making edits to the book. And I sat in front of my computer day in, day out for 3 days, couldn't get a poem out until I was done editing the book and it was out of my sight. So it's really difficult to switch my brain from poetry to prose. It's quite like a task.
Well, on that, then obviously, because you are still obviously performing some poetry stuff as well, like where is your poetry at the moment, given you are writing the book?
My poetry is at the forefront now, just because I feel like I'm done with the book. The book is finished. I've done my 700th edit on it. It's ready for me to just push that out into the world right now. So I'm focusing mainly on my poetry and on my writing poems because it's become a really good outlet for me, I think.
And then with that, then like, obviously you mentioned how most of your stuff is writing for spoken word and performing. Is there still the thought process though at some stage of like, but I also want a poetry book out as well?
Yes, so fun fact, low-key kind of plugging myself. I do have a poetry book. It's self-published, came out years ago. It's absolutely not who I am now. You know, it's not who I am as a poet now, but it is out there. But I would love at some point in my life to also have a poetry anthology, like a real traditionally published poetry anthology. Something about traditional publishing just calls out to me. Maybe because I don't have to do any of the work. But
I mean, you still got to write the book.
yeah, I know, but my God, the work of formatting that book for Kindle publishing. Oh, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, I don't think I had to do Kindle. So like, I've got 2 books out now, both with Burning Eye Books.
Do you actually?
Yes.
Oh my God, no way.
Yes, I got 2 books out, both with Burning Eye Books, who are a independent spoken word publisher based out in Bristol.
Cool.
And obviously, with working with them, obviously, I was still writing the book, but then I give it to them, like, cool. And now you do the publishing side of it. You do that.
You know, I don't want to. Why am I working on formatting and colours and drawings? I did the part.
Yeah. Like, because even with Burning Eye, what was nice about them is like they have an in-house artist to do stuff like book covers, etc. But I was just like, cool, but I've got a very specific taste that I want to do, so I'm going to get a friend in to do a thing here because I have a very important goal in mind.
But that's amazing. I love that. I would utilise my friends as well if my friends drew. Yeah.
But like with obviously like the writing and stuff, and like especially with spoken word, and like I know I can talk on this myself as well, but like for you, how is it putting a spoken word poem into the book, and that difference between obviously like writing to it to be performed out loud versus writing for it to be written in the book, and does that change much?
I don't think so. I think even before I started writing poems that were spoken word poems, when I would write a poem, it would always follow a certain voice in my head. It would always follow a certain tempo, which is why I got uncomfortable with sharing my poetry, because I always expected people to just know how I wanted it to be
read
read.
it the way I wrote it.
Like, why are you reading it like that? Like,
why have you paused then?
Why are you singing it? And so I think, in a way, I could argue then I've always been a spoken word poet. I've just never spoken the poetry. So I will write it however I intend for it to be performed. And anyone who buys the book perhaps will know what it's like when it's been performed or have seen the video, or, you know, I guess we'll have to interpret it in their own voice.
No, that's it's like with both my books. Like, obviously, a lot of it is the way a lot of Burning Eye's kind of sales work is the idea that they only publish spoken word poets. So
Cool.
It's poets that are often performing a lot as it is. So it's the thing of do the gig, sell the book after the gig kind of thing. Which also means that you've heard how I say the poems, now you can read it, so you've got that voice in your head.
Exactly.
So it's always been that little bit weird when people have bought my book without knowing me. And like, obviously, I fucking love it. But it's always that, no, what are you getting out of this? And like, I don't know if it was a compliment or not, but I got a message from a friend the other day of, so I've been lucky enough that my book has been in like Waterstones, etc. So it's nice that it's been in there. I got a message from a friend the other day of like, cool, you having your book in Waterstones was one thing, but I've just seen it in Oxfam. And it's like, okay.
No, that's a good thing, because someone has bought it, read it, been done with it and wanted to share it with the world at a cheaper cost so that anyone could access it. You have to spin it.
But yeah, that was definitely a moment of like, I mean, that's a wonderfully niche thing there. I don't know how many other poets have got their, especially on the scene that I'm in.
Exactly. How much poetry do you see in Oxfam?
So like,
that means enough people had to have purchased it that someone who actually has the time to get rid of books. Do you know what I mean? I've still got books from when I was 16. I have time to get rid of books. So it's good. I see it as a good thing. It's a compliment.
We're taking it as a compliment.
We're taking
but
it.
like with you then looking for, so we've obviously touched on it a little bit, but like for future plans, etc. Obviously you're just looking to be published.
Yeah.
Both for prose and poetry. Are there any other future goals or like any like more specific to the future goals of like what is the dream? Not end goal, but yeah, what are the dream goals and bucket list things?
The next goal.
Where the next goal and kind of what's on the bucket list? Like, is it like, cool, I want to have the one book and then I'm done, or like, I want the book that's going to become a movie, it's going to become a thing, etc.
Okay.
Or like...
So the absolute authorial dream is to be a New York Times bestseller. Mm-hmm. And this book that I've just written is the first book in a series. So for the book to do well enough for the series to be completed, I think one of my biggest dreams, like one of my biggest author dreams, is to have like a fandom for my books.
Nice.
Just because like I love being part of book fandoms, and just a big enough fandom that someone can make a joke or make a video about it and everyone just knows what it means. Just something where people feel comfortable. I want to be on Tumblr, you know, I want my book on Tumblr. That's when you know you've made it. And then to make it to the big screen. I would love to see my story. I think my story would be great on the big screen. I just think I'd be because it's fantasy. I'd really need a big budget, or I'd love it more in like an arcane style animation. I think that would be fucking sick.
Off pointing off screen here, my wall of arcane posters there.
Yeah, I can see Vi right there, love of my life.
Oh, that show got me. That show.
Do you know
got
what
me
I
a
mean?
lot.
And I think after watching that show, I realized, why do we keep trying to make live actions of sci-fi and fantasy with shitty CGI when you can have that? When you can have something like that? So my goal is to have a huge fandom for my story where people see themselves within these stories. And then it becomes big. It becomes a Hunger Games or an Arcane or a Lord of the Rings, like something like that. That's the dream. And I plan on hopefully publishing under different pseudonyms so that I can have a name for each type of publication I do. So Celine Basma for my fantasy books, because that's a very fantasy author type name. Then Celine Basma for my poetry books, because most people at poetry events know me as Celine Basma, so I'll be Celine Basma. And then if I want to write a romance, I'll go under a different name, stuff like that.
Nice. Like obviously, like talking then into poetry books, like again, obviously this is pie in the sky for you, thinking from now in some respect, but like the idea of like the more you do the prose stuff and that hopefully taking off, does poetry have to fall away, or is poetry a part of that as well? Is that balancing in your future goals?
I think a lot of my, not to use that word, a lot of my talent was, that made me sick. A lot of my like skill when writing comes from the fact that poetry is a massive part of my life. I think when I read my prose, specifically my favorite parts within my prose, it's always very evident that this is only here because I'm also a poet. So I think to put poetry on the back burner would do both myself a disservice and my readers a disservice, because I do not exist without my poetry. I am not me without my poetry. And obviously if I do become an author and I become a prose author, that will then become my job. So I will still need a creative outlet that is a hobby, not a job, so that I can still enjoy it. Yeah.
And then just to finish off this section, and obviously with poetry, I feel like the goal side of things is a little bit less clear, because I don't know if it's as clear a path in poetry as there is in something like writing prose, etc. But with that, like, are there any like goals or things you'd want on your bucket list for poetry in the future?
Do you know what? I think not niche at all. I'd love to be on the Tube. And you know those poems of the day?
Yeah.
I would love to just get on the Tube one day and see that. Or just be one of those, I don't know, like there's this, this is so Gen Z of me. There's this like thing on TikTok that everyone does where they do a slideshow of like lines from poetry. Yeah. And people are like, oh my God, that's so profound. I want to be on one of those. You know, I want my poetry to be heard by a lot more people. I think that's what it is. I want it to be heard and read by a lot more people. Especially I think over the last year, my poetry has been very much with the intention of radicalizing people. So I'd love more people to listen to my poetry and become a bit more radicalized about life.
Nice. I'm going to take that out of context completely and use it as a clip. But
yeah, just that.
I love my poetry to radicalize people. No content on not saying which way I want them to be radicalized. Just that I want
Arab
them to,
guest wants to radicalize people.
yeah, just no, like not saying which side we're on here. And if they're actually leave it just completely
Just up to you.
context.
Yep.
Exactly, that's how it works. That's a good way to kind of wrap up our timeline section now. But now we're going to go into we're probably going to it's still going to be talking poetry. We're going to go into a more in-depth conversation now, as we do a let's talk about now.
Let's talk about it.
I think especially with prose being a thing here, and I have not been able to talk to many people about prose as much on this podcast yet. Just in general, what is it about prose that appeals to you?
I think poetry for me, I don't read a lot of poetry. I'm more a write and perform or listen at an event. Prose is something that is a piece of cake to bite into, you know, it's a thing to sink into. It's a story to just hide in and immerse yourself in and disappear into. It's like, it's an entirely different world, and it depends on the genre, but regardless of the genre, it's kind of this thing that sucks you in, that is a movie in your head. You know, the most basic example that most people give, it's just prose to me is a movie in my head. It's a thing that becomes something I obsess over so deeply that I could be walking around and I'd see something, I'd be like, oh, the character in my book would love that. The character in this book would find that so funny. And I think that's what prose is for me. Poetry is very much, it sticks with you, but it's not a thing that, you know, to talk to other people about all the time because it's so subjective. Whereas prose is this thing where as many times as you read it, you're always going to find something new, especially depending on the book that you read. So I think, yeah, that's what, it's an escape for me. It's like a little immersive space for me when it comes to prose.
Nice, and generalizing a little bit on both of the art forms here, but I think a lot of people associate spoken word and poetry with very confessional stuff and talking about yourself and that kind of, and even if you're like, even if you're going back to the radicalized and stuff, you're still from your own perspective a lot of the time, etc. And not that a book isn't from your perspective, but a lot of the prose stuff is a lot more, again, it's more fictional, etc.
Exactly.
And you're allowed to create a world there. So how is it for you in terms of like creating the world there? How much time do you put into that before you even start writing the actual story, etc.?
I put so much time into it. You know, the very first thing I did was, so I randomly, my characters came into my brain one day and I didn't know what to do with them, but I knew it was a fantasy book and I didn't even know what the story was. So I stuck like 5 A4 pieces of paper together and I threw dice on them and I drew around the dice and I made sort of like I would for Dungeons and Dragons, you know, the way you'd make a fake map. And I made a map and I just kept on continuously making map after map until there was a map that made sense to me. And I saw that and the story slowly started to build. And I think I didn't start writing or even planning the story until I understood the magic, until I understood the creatures and the supernatural beings and the politics of the world. Because even in a fiction fantasy world, there's going to be politics. And a lot of the time, because of who the writers are, politics is going to reflect the world that we live in today. But because it's fiction, I can make it as sensationalized as I want and no one can say anything because it's fiction, you know. So if I want you to be evil, I can make you the most textbook evil person I've ever met in my life as a form of catharsis for me, but still make it fit within the text, or just like throw in dragons for the sake of the escapism, or, you know, magic here and there, or...
Well, like, jumping on that, and especially the escapism part of it, like, I'm very much a Dungeons and Dragons person, I've been playing that for years, and I DM it a lot, etc. And there's always that balance, especially with stories that we're making on our own, of, like, how much of the quote-unquote real-world politics you want to bring into the game, etc., and how much of this is how much is this escapism, how much is catharsis and this, and, like... Because there's a mix between, oh, well, these races are going to be racist against each other, but that's going to be so you can pay it off in the end.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that. But also at the same time, things of like, but do I want to bring slavery into my world, etc., or whatever? So like for you, like how is that balance of like escapism and like how much of the, I guess, real world do you bring into the book and to what extent?
So I do, it's kind of a 50-50 split for me. Specifically, I don't believe in racism in fantasy books, at least not real life racism, because... The excuse is almost always it's historically accurate because a lot of fantasy books are medieval. But at the same time, dragons weren't historically accurate and you've got them in your book, so you don't need slavery in your book. I think for me, race will always be a societal issue to discuss, even in a fantasy book, even in fiction. But the way it is in my book is race isn't the color of the skin, but rather the species. So, for example, we've got the humans and we've got the Silna. The Silna is an umbrella term for a lot of the supernatural beings. The Silna are oppressed by the humans. That is the race war. That is who the race war is between. And that is very relevant to the storyline. But for me to have made the black people and the Arabs or the black people and the white people hate each other in the book, there would be absolutely no contextual reason for it, because it would in no way whatsoever be relevant to the story. So for me, it's a great form of catharsis to create this political system with this racial divide without having to bring in real racism. Especially, I feel like, as someone that looks like me, why am I writing about, like, why am I forcing my characters to go through this? Why am I doing that when it's not relevant?
So I didn't end up watching the film, but I've watched enough clips and trailers of it, of like the film. I want to say it's Bright, with the Will Smith film, fantasy film for Netflix. And it's a fantasy film where it's like set in the real world, but they've got lots of fantasy creatures. You've got your orcs and all that kind of stuff. But they also reference things in it like the Alamo, etc. And it's like, how have you got a world where dragons and orcs exist, but the Alamo still happens?
This is what I don't understand. You know, like, it's like, how on earth is it like, you've managed a world where you only get your period 3 times a year, but somehow, like, abortion is a sin. Somehow you've still got the same religious system, but, like, I don't die. You know, I live in a world where I can have 7 different lives, but it's just, I'm a woman, so I can't speak. Why? I think, like, authors need to understand, unless it's relevant to the story, you have full creative direction. You can create an entire world, and you chose to just add that miserable little detail in there when you wanted to bring sexism in, make it relevant to the story. For example, for me, sexism only exists within the human world because the humans are humans. Whereas the other race, which is the Silna species, sexism doesn't exist there. It's a matriarchal society, but it's not, you know, they don't fight with one another. And the same as race. Race is the Silna versus the humans, but not the Arabs versus the Scottish and stuff like this. It makes no sense within the context of my story to have those issues in it, but I still make very valid commentary on our social and political issues without having to force people to consume that trauma when it's not necessary. You know, it's just trauma porn for no reason.
Yeah. And I guess, not to go away from the stuff, but just saying vaguely in the stuff, but like with that whole thing of world building, when you are creating all these new things as well, etc., how is it for you balancing also, like, I guess, the logistics of it? Because it's always that one of my favorite YouTube conversations is a conversation between this guy Brennan Lee Mulligan and Matthew Mercer, and they're talking about world building in Harry Potter and how Harry Potter makes no sense, but is also good world building, but also it's not. In that it's good world building because everyone knows their Harry Potter house. So they've done something well there. We all know exactly what it means, etc. Yeah. But you've also got a world where you've got mail delivered by, but like there were some of the slowest birds imaginable. When the world where you've built a system that can teleport, but you're still using owls to do mail.
You know, you've got Diagon Alley powder where you can just teleport yourself, but you need an owl to bring you it. Or like you have to have an assigned pet and someone chooses a rat. Be serious.
So like that idea of the whole world building for you, and like how much thought you put into that, like making like this is good to make sense, but also this is just fun. Like wouldn't it be fun if there was just a dragon here? Like I don't want to question what it means for the world. Like if a dragon hit, I want to go into like, but how did the dragon get here? How did this airplane stop? Don't care. There's just a dragon. Just accept it. Yeah. So how is it balancing that for you?
I think the main, when I first started, I was very focused on it making sense. I was very focused on it being cohesive, on the world making sense. And again, that brings in the political discourse and the rules of the world. And I think it was, I can't remember which author it was. It was either Brandon Sanderson, George R. R. Martin, or Tolkien, and they were doing a masterclass or whatever, and they said when writing a fantasy world, the difference between a good one and a great one is understanding the laws of magic. So for me, it was creating the laws of magic, which is, for example, if a character has the power of fire, regardless of how much they can do with it, should they also be dehydrated when they're done with it? So I was very focused on that. And then once I had that right, and I was getting on with the story, hell yeah, I'm gonna throw some shit. And I had some bioluminescent algae in the story, and it wasn't bioluminescent algae. It's just like the spirits of the past, not relevant to the story at all. But it's fun and it's pretty, and I want it. Or like, there's just random witches in the story for no reason. Like it's fun.
The idea of it's magic bullshit. Like it's magic.
It's magic.
It's magic.
Do you know what I mean? Mind your business. It's magic.
Yeah. It's a vibe.
It's fun. It's very fun.
And I guess for writing your books, and to not bring it back to poetry, but in the whole side of poetry side of things, with poetry being so confessional, how much of you is in your characters, or how much your characters separate from you?
I think I've threaded a tiny bit of myself into most of the characters. So, when reading the characters, I don't think that you'll see me in them necessarily, unless, I've perceived myself completely wrong. But I've self-inserted a little bit. So I've added character traits. So I've added a certain joke that only I find funny, but I've added it to a character because that's my favorite character. Or I've added a certain thing that, there's this moment that's alluded to in my story of something that the character went through when they were younger. And it's never really mentioned or elaborated on. But it's there because this happened to me, and I just wanted it to be in that story because it felt cathartic for me to put that into the story. But I think all in all, they're all pretty different to me, mainly because I've had an easier life than they have.
And then on the almost other side of that, you're obviously then going to have your evil characters, the characters that are nothing like you, etc. So how difficult is it for you to kind of write in a voice that's arguably not yours? And
not at all. Do you know what it is? I take on the voices of all politicians that I can think of that I've ever hated, and I just leak them into these evil characters that I hate. Easy. In fact, easiest characters to write.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Then, in terms of just writing in general, then for you, obviously we're talking a lot about the fantasy side of things, but as you've alluded to, you would again, you're open to writing romance stuff, etc., and all that kind of things. What are the differences when it comes to writing in different genres for you?
Well, I don't know. I don't consider myself an expert. Disclaimer before anyone comes to me.
No, we're all experts here. Everything is completely
everything
factual.
I say is right and everyone else is wrong.
Exactly.
So I don't consider myself an expert, but I think first and foremost, the tone of voice is very different. Based on books I read, the tone of the voice of the story feels different when you're reading a fantasy, especially an adult political fantasy, as opposed to a really fun rom-com. That they feel more personal when you're reading a romance book, or they feel a bit more lighthearted, something that you want to pick up at the beach. Whereas, actually, I think the best way to put it is when you write a fantasy book, you're writing it with the intention of this being read in winter by the fire. And when you write a romance book, you write with the intention of it being read in spring at the park. So you want to emulate what winter by the fire feels like and what spring at the park or summer by the beach feels like. So, you want to add some fun, you want to add some humor, you want to add some lightheartedness to romance books, you want to add hope and, delusion and just fun and excitement. And in fantasy, it's just the world is sickening and we must save it from tyranny and stuff like that.
Well, so on the tyranny side of things as well, in terms of especially writing these genres and all that kind of stuff, obviously there's a lot of awareness of what's happened before. So how much of there is you to kind of A, try and bring something original, or B, not even, no, but yeah, how much there is you to kind of, I want to bring something original and unique to the story, but also things of but ultimately the hero is going to win. I mean, there's a reason why the story has been told many a times, etc. So how is that balanced?
So the main political issue is very reflective in my book of current issues, particularly within the Middle East, in a very fantastical way. I think with writing specifically, especially in a fantasy genre, it's incredibly difficult to be original because, like you said, everything is inspired by the world we live in today. It's the whole discussion about people pretending The Handmaid's Tale was an incredibly unique story that existed. And no, women, they went through this. But so I think making it unique ties in again about, I think, the reasons behind things and the ways in which this is fought for, how people end up in the situations that they do. I think you can give every author the same plot line, but what will make a story most different and stand out the most is the way in which they choose to fill out the middle, the way in which they create their characters, the way dialogue happens, character arcs, the way the characters suffer and progress. Is the character just immediately very good at something, or do they keep losing over and over again until they finally win? Or sometimes when the author's really brave and they actually kill off the hero, just to show you sometimes the heroes don't win. I personally despise that, but only because why did they lose, But I think it's an incredible decision on the author's part to be do you know what, fuck you. Sometimes we don't win. Historically, we never win, stuff like that. So I think making a story unique is the middle bit, I think.
Well, yeah, because I think that kind of one of the things in one of the podcasts I've been listening to, there's a lot of like script writers that are involved in it, and one of the things they talk about is the issue with, especially a lot of comedies, but an issue with like stories in general, where a lot of what makes some of these newer comedies or things unique is that how much they break form, etc.
Yeah.
But a lot of that breaking form is in the first 2 acts, because ultimately it's like, but we still got to end this thing. It still has to be a satisfying ending. As much as you want to break form, you still have an audience that wants to leave feeling and things. So like, as much as you can do all this unique thing beforehand, like, but he's still got to get the girl, and he's still got to save the princess and do the very simple things, and I can make the journey to the princess so much more interesting and unique.
Exactly.
But he's going to get there.
Exactly.
It's going to be a thing. And
there are 3 points. There's this, and that's the 4 points. This, and this. And that's the story. And you can break form in this and this, but here, not so much, unless you're really experimenting as an author and you really believe that there will still be an audience for this. Then you're very brave, and I admire you. But yeah, it's you break that form in the first few parts of the story.
Well, like, you mentioned the audience there, and again, this is partly for the novel, also for poetry as well. How much, when writing stuff, whether it be prose or poetry, does the audience play a factor, at least writing versus editing versus and stuff? Like, when does the audience come into it for you and your thinking? And is it different between the art forms?
Yes, to the different part, I think. But what is similar between them both is the audience doesn't come in at all until I've decided there will be an audience. So there are a lot of poems, especially spoken word poems, that I've never shown anyone or I never plan on performing. So I don't care about who the audience is, because I'm the audience. So I don't try to sugarcoat it, or I don't try to say it in a certain way, or I don't try to be, polite or gentle with the way that I deliver it. No, this is how I'm feeling right now, and this is what I want to write, and that an audience for this doesn't exist, so why must I cater to an invisible audience? With prose, I've always intended on writing a book to be published, so I've always been aware of the audience. But I think I'd say the audience doesn't dictate what I write, but I think it's in the back of my mind in terms of how I choose to deliver a message. Not everyone wants to consume something in the same way that I do, or I'm very much a harsh love type of person sometimes, and not everyone is that type of person. They don't want to read something that's very in their face, especially because it's a young adult book. I have to remember my audience isn't a 25-year-old, practiced fantasy reader. They're probably a 16-year-old who's only read a few fantasy books in their life. So that's how the audience comes in when it comes to prose for me. It's just understanding the age range and the skill set, I guess I could say, or not the skill set. 16-year-olds are very smart, but just the age range of who they are and how I cater to them.
Nice. And obviously we touched on a little bit in the timeline section, but like with the audience and like engaging with them, obviously we've talked about book talk a little bit. It's like firstly, for people who aren't as familiar with it, what would you describe book talk as, etc.? And then within that as well, like how are you working within that?
Okay, so book talk is just a subsection of TikTok where people talk about, review, recommend books, make jokes about books. It's essentially, think of any online community for something or your own personal niche, but it's that for books, and it's very big. It's a huge subsect of TikTok. It single-handedly played a massive part in saving bookstores during COVID. They were all in danger of going out of business, especially Barnes and Noble in America. So BookTok is a massive online platform for books. Anyone will notice now they walk into a bookstore and they see as recommended on BookTok, or they'll see stickers on books that say BookTok sensation, stuff like this. It's been a very monumental part of the publishing process. My part in it is I started there as book recommendations, then I became book reviews as well as book recommendations, and now I am absolutely anything literature related I am going to bring onto that channel. I think I've built a very big community for myself on this channel. I'm very grateful for it. But it does mean that whenever I want to talk poetry, prose, book review, hateful book review, hate reading, really furious about something an author did, I bring it to book talk. And
I obviously, with so much of book talk being, let's arguably say, like in the last 5 years, actually, like how has book talk in general changed the literature space? Because like, again, I think a lot of people can talk about how social media has changed things in general, but how has book talk changed it, would you say?
I think one of the biggest selling points of Book Talk is that it's made reading cool again. It's made reading for fun, something that people aren't embarrassed to do, which is a crazy thing to say, but there was a time where, being the reader or being the introvert wasn't the coolest thing to do. It was the thing a lot of people often got made fun of, or not made fun of, but just, you weren't part of the cool kids, you weren't part of the cool group. And I think seeing, social media, especially with our new generations, is the determiner for if you are cool or not. So being big on social media and it being about books and seeing everyone talking about it and seeing that there is this community you can be a part of has made it to people something that is less daunting to come into. So I think it's changed the book world and the publishing world because it's made it clear to anyone of any age that if you want to read, you could just read, just read what you want. Or sometimes people say that they're not readers because reading is boring, but that's because they've only ever picked up the 10 laws of power and, habit and all of this. And then they come on Book Talk and they just see someone jumping on their sofa screaming over this rom-com that they've read. And they're like, what the hell is that? I want to read that. And they buy it and they read it and they find that they enjoyed it. So they go back to that same creator and they look at what that creator recommends because they've understood. There is going to be at least one creator on Book Talk that has the exact book taste as you that you're going to follow and get book recommendations for and boost sales. It boosted sales like crazy for bookstores.
But obviously with sales as well now, and this is I'm going to go expanding this, obviously, as with so many social media things, not everyone is on TikTok and all that kind of stuff. So when thinking of the audience, how are you balancing that? Cool, this is a good platform, but if you need to make it for other people as well or get engaged in it, how is that for you?
Well, that's why I branched out to Instagram and YouTube. I'm basically trying to immerse myself into every online book space. So there's Bookstagram and there's BookTube. BookTube and Bookstagram have been here a lot longer than BookTok has. BookTube been here for a very long, maybe as long as YouTube has existed. So that there are loyal BookTubers on there. So trying to branch out, because you're right, the readers on BookTok and the readers on BookTube and the readers on Twitter and Instagram, they're all very different, or at very least not different, but they all engage with book reviews in a different way. They all engage with books in a different way. And so the way that I would review something on TikTok is a little bit different to how I would review it on YouTube. I know that if someone's on TikTok, they don't want to listen to me talk about a book for 6 minutes. So I will condense the review into a minute long. Whereas on YouTube, I'm going to talk for 10 minutes about this book and they're going to listen. They're going to, because people are on YouTube for long form, on TikTok for short form. So you have to cater to these audiences when you're trying to grow an audience. So I know now when I want to promote my book, when, hopefully, fingers crossed, I eventually do get published, I'm learning how to promote it to my TikTok audience and my Instagram audience and my YouTube audience and my Threads and my Twitter audience, etc.
Nice. And now just to finish this section on some random but very controversial book opinions. Now, just in general, I say controversial, but cool. Stance on audiobooks.
Hot takes.
Go.
Audiobooks.
Yes.
I don't have any beef with audiobooks. I don't understand this whole audiobooks aren't reading narrative just because why'd you care? Even if you could present me a really well-honed argument for why audiobooks doesn't count as reading, why do you care? Why do you care so much? So that's my stance on audiobooks. I personally don't do it because I put something in my ear and it becomes white noise. It's just there as a mode for me to daydream. So the only audiobook I've ever successfully listened to is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy.
Yes.
But that's because she narrated it. I wanted to hear it in her voice. But other than that, not for me. But I don't care what you do with your life and how you
quickly
read.
On that, so the audiobook side of it is then especially I feel like something like the Jeanette McCurdy one is a different vibe, but with some of these especially fantasy ones, heavily produced audiobooks including sound effects, etc., or just writer/good person reading it.
Do you know what? I think I'd listen to audiobooks if there was, sound effects and different voice actors. I think for me, it's when there's one voice actor being every character and speaking, it's going to become white noise, brown noise, all of that in the back of my head. I'm not going to hear it anymore. Or it's just, I'm not going to hear it how I would have heard it if I was just reading it in my own head, because I get really immersed when I read. So not for me. But if it was actors for every voice and a separate voice for the third person narrative, and then sound effects, I could get into that.
I can't. Just where I realize I've fucking Mandela affected myself, etc. But overall, I've never been the biggest reader. Like, I'm very much engaged with films and stories in that sense. But like, I do long train journeys. Give me a book, and I will do a long train journey on a book on a long train journey.
Yeah.
I was catching up on some of the Star Wars books section. I think a lot of the Star Wars books have some sound effects editing in them, and that's always been a cool thing. But like, this is now how I remember. Like, I don't remember if it was like every single character has a different person kind of thing, or it's like you've got a few people involved, so it's a bit different, but not like they've overproduced it. Like, every single blaster has a blaster sound effect.
Yeah. Just when it's necessary, you know. For like, just have, you know, a male voice for the male characters, a female voice for the female characters, and a separate voice for the narration. That's what I need for when it's the narrator who's also being all the speakers and doing all these different accents. It just doesn't. I can't get into that. Okay, next opinion.
So, again, touched on it very briefly, but to go on it properly now, like, we're obviously authors writing for fictional characters and make-believe stuff. There is obviously the whole trope of male writers writing women-led characters,
oh God,
etc.
she breasted boobily down the stairs.
I love a boobily.
It's, God, the way, do you know what, it's so... I can't even be angry about it because it's funny, but just on this, might be a hot take. I believe if you haven't been intimate with a woman, don't write women. in my humble opinion.
Fair.
Or at the very least, don't write women as though you understand women. You know? Because I don't know, man. I don't know. Unless, actually, I think that's too hot of a take.
Too much, went too far.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I think consult women before you write women. That's what I will say. Consult women, cis women, trans women, any woman in the world, you know, she, thems, or everyone that identifies as a woman, consult them first before you write women, please, for the love of God. I saw this video of a man and he was giving, I can't remember who it is, I wish I could so you could watch it. It was this man and he was giving advice to men for how to write women. And it was the single worst advice I've ever heard in my life. He was literally like, when women react to things, what did he say? It was like, he was saying, when you write a woman reacting to news, you must make sure that her emotions are heightened and she gets incredibly sad and the tears stream. And it's like, the news is just, you know, sorry, like, I'm running a bit late. What are you talking about? Newsflash, he's not a published author. So
Fair. Okay, so on digital books, and one, do you have a preference between digital and book in hand?
I prefer to have physical books, but I've recently been reading a lot on my Kindle because I've been reading bigger, heavier books. So it depends on the book. Depends on the book.
That's very much just a practical thing. Yeah. I don't want to have to carry this book.
I'm not commuting to work with an 800-page book.
Not really a hot take thing, but one that I think everyone has to go through at some stage, especially in that writing and reading community. Buying books you don't read and don't think you ever will read, but you're buying it anyway.
See, this is a difficult one because I always say there are two hobbies, reading books and buying books. I have a lot of books in my room that I don't ever plan on reading. They're just, you know, it's the cute classics. But I don't know how to comment on it because it's your money. Do what you want with your money at the end of the day. But actually, man, do what you want. I think I can't comment because I'd be a hypocrite because I do have a lot of books in my room that I never plan on reading. They were just stunning. They were just stunning books that I need. So you do you, queen.
And then lastly, just to wrap this all up then, and this is when I think of in a lot of art forms, to be fair. So, well, I guess not really a hot take thing, but like, does every book and story you have to write have to be the best story?
No. Not at all. Some books should be bad. I think we need palate cleansers sometimes, or sometimes, you know, I just want something to do with my eyes. I read a 150-page erotic fanfiction of Shrek. Was it a 1-star review? Yes. Was it one of the worst books
Shrek is life.
No, literally, that was the whole premise. Was it 1-star review? Yes. Was it one of the worst books I've ever read? Yes. Would I read it again? Probably. It was incredibly entertaining, you know? So not every book has to be profound.
So I know I said that was the last question, but now just because I'm now curious and I have to go into this route now, how much fan fiction have you
written?
Yeah.
None. I've never written fan fiction. My version of fan fiction is my delusional journal entries. That's what fan fiction is to me. But yeah, I've never written any. Barely read any. I've read the Shrek one, but that's because it's published. That was a physical paperback I had in my hand. And I read, you know, After. After is like the One Direction Harry Styles fan fiction.
Okay.
It's like it was published into a real book and it's been made into movies. That one, I read those when they were still being released on Wattpad. Like I was one of the commenters in the comment sections, but those are the only fanfics I've read.
No, someone was here the other night, last night, and we were talking. The topic of fan fiction came up, and there was a fan fiction. I think it was a One Direction fan fiction where
it's always a One Direction fan fiction.
She wrote about her dating, I want to say Harry Styles,
right?
But like in the story, she passes away in the first act.
Okay.
And then the rest of the book is Harry Styles grieving her and reminiscing all the time they had together.
Okay.
And it's like, you just wrote that then. Why did you have to die?
You could have just wrote the experiences, and then died if you really wanted death in the story.
I don't understand what's going on here.
Listen, we can't think too much into it because Wattpad is 13-year-olds. It's just these writers, they're just 13. They have, do you not remember being 13 and daydreaming about like dying and how people would react to it?
I mean, I still do it today, to be fair.
Well, exactly. So she just daydreamed about Harry Styles doing it.
We were talking about like our Tumblr data section, which part of Tumblr you were on it section. I was very much in the fandom part of Tumblr.
Yep.
But mine was very much I was fandom part of Tumblr that makes GIFs and likes cool posts about it. And then there's other part, you guys are role playing, actually writing. Nah, it's not me. That's the one step too far.
Same. I was on the I was in the fandoms. Specifically, I was really in Supernatural fandom. I don't know if you've ever watched Yeah, no, just Supernatural. It was solely Supernatural. And I was the part that's, liking the GIFs and, liking all the jokes and the commentary. I wasn't the part that was shipping two brothers together.
Wincest.
Yeah, Wincest. I wasn't part of that, and it made me so happy when I would watch Supernatural and they would comment on it. Supernatural was so meta. Supernatural was such a meta show, and they would be like, "Do they know we're brothers?" And then he'd be like, "Yeah, I don't think they care." I'm like, "They don't."
Because it was the French Mistake or whatever it was, the episode where they came into the different world to play themselves,
where they were Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles.
Yes, I had my Supernatural phase. That was a thing.
Yeah, I just finished my third rewatch, literally a few days ago.
I mean, I can't say much. I'm going for my Buffy and Angel rewatch at the moment. To be fair, and that's kind of what
they're comfort shows.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Buffy I will stand by to this day. As much as Joss Whedon has, Buffy is a show that again every time I watch it, it's like, no, this is still really good writing. There were definitely some tropes that have been overplayed. A part of it is that because when he did it, it wasn't overplayed. It's
being remade, isn't it?
It is. Yes, they have confirmed it's being remade. Chloe Zhao is helming it, at least directing it, I think.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, cool. So we've got good people involved, and like Sarah Michelle Gellar is vaguely involved. Don't know how much. But like it seemingly got the people's blessing, and it's not going to include Joss Whedon. So it's like, okay, cool. Pardon me, but it's like, okay, cool. I'm game for that. But I was fandom. Immediately, my main Tumblr fandom was Glee.
Oh, you were one of those.
Yeah.
I've never watched a full episode of Glee.
So I will stand on the fact that the first 13 episodes of Glee are fucking amazing TV.
Okay.
They are truly great. That first season as a whole is good, but those first 13 episodes are the best. You can tell, though, from Glee, even between that first 30 episodes and the rest of season 1, you can tell when fans started to watch it and were able to start voicing their opinions.
Yeah.
And you can tell that the writers were slightly listening.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to season 2 and then 3 onwards, it's like, oh no, this is you're a parody now. You are a parody of yourself, and this is too many. This has gone bad.
Have you seen all those like social media discourse that Leah Michelle can't read? I find that so funny.
I love it. I love a good social media discourse.
I love a good like inside joke on social media.
It's the Avril Lavigne is dead thing.
Yes. Do you know? I genuinely, part of me kind of still believes that.
I want to like. Part of me is like, I want to believe. Part of me is like, this is the dumbest thing ever.
It's like Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer.
Yeah.
Like.
So it's like. It's like, no. But also, you are committing to the bit enough that, you know what? Fair play. I respect.
It's like there's this new one about blinding soup.
Oh, yes.
Where it's like everyone is in on this joke except for a few people who are really like, it's such perfect rage bait. People have made 5-minute think pieces like, how dare you blind your kid? It's like, do you really think there's a soup that can temporarily blind your child?
Like, this is the power of the internet is a strong one. And I both love it and fear it in equal measures every single day. But yes, with that as a very random tangent we've gone off. I know. But now we're going to go to my section I like to call slow fire questions.
Okay.
What I have a habit of doing, phrasing this, I have a series on my YouTube channel where I will get poets down and ask them quick fire questions. So
I've seen it.
See, I've got my list of 100 questions and I'm trying to do as many as I can in the time.
Okay.
But I think some of these questions deserve longer answers, if you will.
Okay.
More time on them. So we're going to go through 5 at random and properly give time to answer them and discuss them and go on random tangents about how Avril Lavigne is dead again, obviously.
Okay.
And all that stuff.
Yeah.
So to start this off, can you give me a random number in between 1 and 100?
12.
Then we're going to start off with, what is your go-to karaoke song?
Or Lay All Your Love on Me,
Oh.
specifically the Mamma Mia version, or Not Throwing Away My Shot, Hamilton.
Oh, nice. Are you a big karaoke person?
Not really. I'm a big sing very loudly person, but I haven't been to karaoke very often.
So like, for you in going to karaoke, 1, are you a good singer? And 2, is it about being good or just about having fun? What are you siding
1,
towards?
no. 2, fun. Absolutely cannot hold a note to save my life. However, will continue to sing very loudly into a microphone.
No, it's fair. And like, and just on a tangent, because it came up the other day for me, where are you on the Lin-Manuel Miranda scale at the moment?
Love him. Do you know what it was? I went through a phase where he was annoying me, but have you seen his glam bot? Oh my God, that glam bot was fantastic. And I'm back on do you know what, Lynn? You kind of ate that. You kind of ate that up. And you know what? His songs his songs are good. They're catchy. Moana, Hamilton, Vanessa.
I love In the Heights.
Yeah.
I still, one of my favourite, because obviously I had to update things for In the Heights, the movie, I still love, there's a line in the, don't make me laugh, you've been trying all night, you've been shaking your ass for like half of the heights.
Yes.
It's just like, why have you added that? That's a weird line to add
And do you know what? The tone was different to the entirety of the song. Like it was all, and then he goes, don't make me laugh, you've been trying all night.
And then he was like, do I get another chance? It's like, you don't. You literally negged her.
Yeah, you just called me a whore.
Yeah.
Like,
it was, like, I love In the Heights, but also I do not understand that whole blackout dance scene or whatever, in as much as in the club. I don't understand that club scene because it's the whole, they're in the club together and she asks to go to a dance with Isnavi and Isnavi says no and then lets the other people dance with her. It's like, you let them, you
yeah, but do you know what?
First.
That's like an average experience of a straight man. That's very much what it's like interacting with them.
I was just like, but you said no and then got annoyed when the thing that you let happen happened.
Yeah.
That was, yeah.
And you're the problem now, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to being a woman.
I don't get that one. But yeah, another number, please.
70.
70. Then we are going down to, who is your hero or idol?
Oh, no. No. Change. Go to
Name
68.
One. Name one now.
I don't have one. My hero. I don't know. Nobody saved me.
I like, let's go for these books. Like this book, like a nice book, didn't save my life.
Didn't
do
save
anything
my
for me.
life.
Like it was fun, but yeah.
God. That's my hero.
Fair.
That's my answer.
Fair. Another number.
33.
33. Then we are going for, are you organised?
Partially. I'm organised about things I need done properly. I'm not organised about things people ask me to organise.
Fair. Like, how do you mean?
For example, with my writing, I will have a system about what I need to do. However, if you've asked me to complete a task, I'm just going to sit down and complete the task based on vibes.
No.
But it's about, I think I'm organized about things that feel stressful to me. I'm organized when I feel like if I'm not organized, it's going to drive me insane. And I'm not organized about things that are easy. So for example, I'm a baker. I used to have a cake business. Very organized about that. No one is allowed in the kitchen while I bake. However, when I'm cooking, I just kind of throw in and hope the ancestors guide me. So it's like that.
Fair. And like, I guess so with the organization stuff as well, like obviously with stuff like book talk, book YouTube, booktube, etc., all that kind of stuff. Like, how organized are you when it comes to like planning what goes on where and planning the actual videos, etc., for them?
Not very. I kind of just go off vibes a lot of the time. You know, I finish the book, I make a review, I post it. Unless, for example, I filmed a video in an outfit I plan on wearing at a poetry event, and I know that I'm going to have poetry videos, so I'm not going to post that video till after the poetry videos because I can't repeat an outfit on my account. Do you know what I mean? They have to be posted around the same time. So like that, I guess, but Not really. I'm more organized for YouTube, I think, because it's longer form and I need to speak. Like this video essay, I had to actually write an essay and plan out how I was going to speak it. So TikTok, not organized at all. YouTube, pretty organized.
And like, are we at the stage yet where we have like got all the algorithm data for TikTok and Instagram? I have to know the right times to post and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yes. So on Instagram, I have to post at 6 p.m. On TikTok, I have to post at 8:45. But algorithm-wise, I had it hacked to a T until Trump, until it was sold basically, and the algorithm has completely changed since then, and you can see the difference in like engagement on my account because of it.
Fair. Another number, please.
100.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how cool are you?
Do you know what? I think I'm pretty cool. Like 8.
What's the coolest thing about you?
Oh, okay. Whoa, I didn't expect follow-up questions. What is the coolest thing about me?
Or what would you define as coolness in your eyes then? Because I think, again, this is the whole thing, I think, the fun of cool, of like, cool is such a subjective
what does cool
thing.
mean, you know?
So what do you see as cool?
Do you know what it is? I feel like if I met me, I'd really want to be my friend. And that's what I consider cool.
Yeah.
Maybe perhaps narcissistic is the right word, but that's what I consider cool. You know, I've been the new girl at like 6 different schools. I've lived in many different countries. I speak multiple languages. I can adapt to every situation. I think I'm kind of funny, you know? I think that's to me what I would consider charisma is what I consider cool. I think I have a personality.
No, because it's always fun of like going to like different like poetry events or theatre things or whatever, etc., and seeing like what people think is cool. Because like what's cool to theatre people is not cool to a person that goes to football match, etc., and all that kind of stuff.
Theatre kids hate football people. My God, I hate football fans like so much, and I know they probably despise me when I put that Hamilton on. They probably hate me. But that's what I find cool. You know who's cool? That you know, Max is so cool, and Kid and Nancy is really really cool. They're cool people. They're cooler than me.
I mean, we say Kid and Nancy is cool. I will fully call him out from this, though I also agree with him on this. He was here for my birthday last night, and he very much was in touch with my Wild Wild West poster.
Right.
When I played the Wild Wild West song, Kid and Nancy danced to it and was singing along to it. He is that level of cool. We are in that same thing.
I love
which
that.
Which is that thing of like, awful film. Love it. It's awful.
And you know what? Sometimes you have to love terrible things.
It's so problematic. It's so bad. And
I've never seen it.
Like, I'd almost be fascinated to see what your first reaction to it is without watching it. And like, it's bad.
Oh God, why? What's so bad about it?
So it's Will Smith playing a kind of cowboy detective or whatever thing, but the's a lot of questionable racial things that are happening in the film as well. The main,
it's American.
Yeah, this was like, I want to say late 90s. Yeah, it was been late 90s because like 90s, and like the main bad guy in the film has no legs, is using a wheelchair for most of it. But then also uses a mechanical spider for his legs towards the end of it. And there's a lot of jokes about him being disabled in it. This
is very common in late 90s movies, you know.
And there's a lot of just things like that. And like there's the co-lead whose name I've completely forgotten, but he does a lot of like dressing up in drag, etc., which is like fine because like we like drag in this house, etc. But there's definitely ways of doing it. It's like this is a very 90s version of your man dressed as woman versus the arguably more progressive drag we're into now. And just generally not funny. But the funniest thing about Wild Wild West is not the film itself. The funniest thing about Wild Wild West, and this is a long tangent and I need to go for Wild Wild West, but I'm sticking to it now. The funniest thing about Wild Wild West is that this is the film that Will Smith said yes to whilst turning down doing The Matrix.
Oh my God.
Will Smith said no to The Matrix. Instead, he did Wild Wild West.
Well, do you know what? It didn't clearly impact his career at all, apparently.
It was,
That's insane.
So that was a long thing of Kid Nancy is cool, but also he's not cool, but it's the best.
But
kind
that's
of way
cool to us. It's cool by our standards.
I love him. I've adopted him as my son. He's cool. We love it. We love that.
Go.
But yeah. Fuck it. I know I said 5, but I can do 2 more questions. Let's 2 more. Give me another number, please.
26.
Cool. Then we're going for, how often do you talk to your parents?
Every single day. Well, I live with my mum. My mum and my dad lives abroad, and I talk to him every single day.
Yes, I'm assuming by this, then you're also close to your parents as well.
Yes.
Close
Very
siblings?
close relationships. I have an older brother, also live with him, so I talk to him every day.
And close as well?
Yes, very close. I'm very lucky with my family dynamics.
We love that.
We
Nice.
love that. What was it, your 33rd birthday?
Yes.
33.
Cool. Then we're going to end on... Oh, you already do 33. That's are you organised?
Oh, okay.
Then one more.
71.
Then let's go for... What topic do you write about most?
Currently, politics. At the moment, it's politics.
Yeah.
It's very much Middle Eastern politics, specifically.
And then, like, over your career as a writer, what have you come back to most? What's the one that always you come back to, if you will?
I always come back to sort of melancholic sadness. I feel like the best poetry is the kind of sad poetry.
As in sad about the world, or are we going back to the whole breakup poem sad?
No. Just not even at anything, just that deep sadness, just that whole like sinking feeling. I feel like all of my greatest poetry has been written like in the depths of despair. So yeah, I think it's always politics, sadness. And actually, I write a lot of love poems, but I don't write them till my heart's been broken. Because I feel like when I'm in love, my poetry sucks. You know what I mean? I'm happy. Like I don't have any talent when I'm happy. So it's once my heart's been broken, I then express all the love I have in my poetry.
So we need to make you sad for to get a lot of good stuff out of you.
Yep. I really tried to write a Valentine's Day poem, but no one's broken my heart in the near distant past.
I mean, is that an invitation for someone to come in?
No. Looking right at the camera lens. Absolutely not an invitation. Stay as far away from me as possible.
Good. I love this. I've always tried to. I think because I see obviously so many people on the scene writing the poems they do. There's always been that part of me that's like, well, you guys have already covered that stuff. I'm going to try and cover what hasn't been covered, which often means I end up trying to at least write not happy poems, but more positive poems. And it's always been a fun challenge to try and do that, because even in my positive, happier poems, there is that thing of almost not self-deprecating humor, but like, it's a happy poem. I'm still going to put something down here, but then it's going to come back with the joke, and it's like, that's what makes it fine and funny. Like, as with so many comedy things of like, the world sucks, but here's the joke, we can laugh about it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like,
it's like that poem you wrote about your dad. It was such a beautiful poem, but you still just kind of threw in a little bit of like, to it, a little bit of shake my shoulders, just a tiny bit, but still
brilliant for an audio
might
podcast.
shed a tear, yeah.
No, it's like how much have you tried to write for like happy or love poems, and like what is it about them that's like, is it something where like people have said they don't like it, or just you don't like it?
It's not that I don't like it. I think it's just that I can't do it. I think it's just when I write happiness and joy, I write it more in prose or in journal style entry writing. But poetry, I feel like, at least with the recent projection of my poetry and the recent way it's grown into telling a story, I require it to tell a story. And I feel like when I'm happy, there isn't that overarching story as much as, with a political poem where I start in one place and I explain it in the middle and I round off back at the place that I started. I feel like I can't find that when I just write like a happy, feel good, upbeat poem. For me personally, I just can't do it. I mean, hopefully maybe sometime in the future, but it's mainly like I've written one and it was about my friends. But yeah, it's just I just prefer writing sad and political poetry.
No, fair. I mean,
it resonates better with me.
I mean, it's also from the sound of things. It feels like if it was a happy poem, at least might be a thing of like, oh, this moment made me happy, so I'll write about this moment.
Exactly. That's what it is. Like the happy poems that I have very much been, I'm in this moment and I've pulled out my journal and I've just written it down. It's never been like, this is a thing I need to perform. It's always been a few verses rather than a spoken poem.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing of like, and almost to wrap this all up, the whole idea of like so much story-based stuff is about the challenges in the thing. Like,
Yeah.
like stories are built off from conflict in some way, shape, or
Exactly.
form. And there's not as much conflict and happiness other than accepting that you are happy. Kind
Exactly.
Of thing,
You know, like no one wants to read about like, oh, good for you. You know, like I'm so happy that you're so happy.
Because like even in the romantic stories and the rom-coms, there's always that bit of like it's got to be shit first,
Yes.
to then get good.
You
or, like,
need to have conflict
Yeah.
so that we feel good about the feel good ending. Otherwise, if it's just like you're really, really doing well in life, and then you meet someone and you guys are great, and there's no conflict, and then you're married. Well, I don't care about the story.
And it's also with that, it's called the feel good ending, but then we're done. I can't do more of it because now you're happy together. I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Why is there a sequel to a rom com? You know, like Bridget Jones's Diary having 8 different however many.
Like that's the irony of that is the thing of like the whole reason. Like, and I've not watched them, but like the joke of that is like part of why that works because you have to be a different romantic lead each time. So as much as we loved this person, the first one, we're now on to different romantic leads.
Like it works for her because she's so chaotic as a person. So even if it was the same romantic lead, it would still, I think, work for Bridget Jones because she's so chaotic as a person.
The conflict comes in how can you get through the day, etc. Those regular.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's still entertaining to watch. Yeah.
Yes, that will end our slow fire questions and also end the podcast. Thank you for joining me on my podcast as I knock my mic in front of me.
Thank you for having me.
Nice, cool. So you have all of the places online you can be found. So do you want to tell the people online where to find you?
You can find me at Bookish with B on TikTok, _B_ on Instagram. I am Selena's Talking on YouTube. I'm Celine Basma if you want to buy my self-published poetry book. And keep an eye out for when my fantasy book is published.
Nice, cool. I have been Tyrone Lewis. This has been the Process Podcast. All our stuff is in a link tree somewhere, so do all the following, do all of that stuff. That's really nice of you. But the way I end the podcast is I do have an ending for the podcast, which I always do. Same way I end my poetry nights. I love you all. Now fuck off.
Oh,
Goodbye.
amazing.